Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. R. Kelly accused of spreading STDs to women he allegedly assaulted. But the singer's defense attorneys want that testimony kept out of court. The prosecution firing back. And Philadelphia police detectives charged with lying on the stand. How a coerced false confession led to an innocent man locked behind bars for more than 2 decades.
It is beyond extraordinary.
Plus,
I saw Susan lying on the floor.
Robert Durst admits to finding his best friend dead, but says he didn't pull the trigger. Who really killed Susan Berman?
I had no reason to kill Susan Berman.
Law&Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. And welcome to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Saima Chowdhury, in for Brian Buckmeyer, and with me is Terry Austin. Now we begin with R. Kelly. He is set to stand trial this week, and federal prosecutors are fighting back against the defense's bid to drop charges. R. Kelly facing a slew of charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking. Defense attorneys are asking a judge to dismiss all of those, including knowingly transmitting herpes. The singer's attorneys say the STD does not fall under public health law. Well, prosecutors, they disagree and are accusing him of giving herpes to a 17-year-old girl. A jury has now been selected. 7 men and 5 women have been seated to hear this case. Opening statements are set for Wednesday. R. Kelly's attorneys are also pushing to keep out key testimony about his STD status. Our Brian Buckmeyer will be there for all the in-court action and has more on the latest defense motion.
The singer's attorneys want testimony accusing him of spreading herpes to young women kept out of the court. Defense attorneys for R. Kelly are asking the judge to not allow Jane Doe 11 to testify she believes R. Kelly has herpes as early as 2003 because she says she contracted it from him. According to court documents, another accuser also plans to testify she contracted herpes from R. Kelly in 2009. R. Kelly's attorneys say by allowing such testimony in by a lay person as proof that R. Kelly had herpes in 2003 would be to circumvent the requirement of having an expert testify as to whether or not Mr. Kelly had herpes.
All right, let's introduce our guest, legal analyst Dina Dahl. So Dina, let me ask you, R. Kelly claims that these women cannot testify about contracting herpes because they are not medical experts, but aren't they simply testifying as victims of a crime?
Well, you know, his argument is actually an interesting argument because he's saying that they're basically testifying as medical experts in order to prove that he had herpes at the time of their encounter. And it is true that they probably don't have enough medical or scientific background to be able to testify as experts to that. But it's possible the judge might still let it in because the prosecution, even if they allow this testimony to go in, the defense will be able to rebut it by, claiming, oh, how is it that she knew that she got it from R. Kelly and maybe perhaps somebody else? I mean, that line of questioning will go on, if it is let in. So it will be interesting to see here how the judge rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And Terry, Kelly is also arguing that herpes is not an infectious venereal disease as defined by the statute, and therefore he has not committed a crime. Is he correct?
I don't think he's correct because under New York Public Health Law 2307, of course, they give specific mention to other diseases like gonorrhea, but they don't limit it there. So I don't think he has the right to argue that other diseases might not be in that category. And even more than that, there has been case law, multiple cases in New York State, where the court has decided that herpes does fall under that category. So I don't think his argument is going to prevail at all, and the plain meaning of the word, too.
It'll be interesting to see. All right, let's turn now to more top legal news. The former socialite and accused Jeffrey Epstein accomplice loses her bid to dismiss her sex trafficking indictment. Ghislaine Maxwell is widely known for her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and was charged with the crimes of enticement of minors and sex trafficking of underage girls. Maxwell made a motion to dismiss the sex trafficking charge, claiming that the recent overturn of Bill Cosby's conviction was a similar situation. Well, the federal judge dismissed this argument, amongst others that Maxwell's team filed, including the claim that prosecutors waited too long to charge her with sex trafficking between 2001 and 2004. Now, all of these charges still stand, and Maxwell is set to be tried in November. Well, a UFC fighter stops an attempted carjacker. Professional fighter Jordan Williams had stopped at a local gas station to pick up a drink and some snacks in Denver. Well, when he walked out, he was greeted with a surprise: his car pulling away. Well, Williams jumped into action, as you could see, pulling the would-be thief out of the car. The fighter posted this security footage on his Instagram, where it quickly went viral. Now, he explains that he has a push-to-start car, which is why the carjacker was not able to drive away until Williams was inside of the vehicle. Well, the fighter says that he wished he was harder on the carjacker, but he'll settle for getting his car back. Well, still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, Robert Durst admits to finding his best friend dead on the floor of her home, but insists he didn't pull the trigger. But first, exonerated after 25 years behind bars. Prosecutors are now turning the table and charging the cops. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
And welcome back. This next story is about cops finding themselves now on the other side of the law. A grand jury is recommending criminal charges against 3 Philadelphia homicide detectives. The detectives are accused of lying in court about a coerced false confession that led to an innocent man spending more than 2 decades behind bars. Anthony Wright was convicted in 1993 of the rape and murder of 77-year-old Louise Talley. Prosecutors say 3 now retired detectives used unlawful tactics to coerce Wright into signing his name onto a false confession. And the detectives are also accused of lying about finding clothing in Wright's home. Turns out it was actually found in Talley's home. Well, a judge finally allowed the clothing to be tested for DNA in 2013, which matched to a different man. But Wright, he remained in prison until 2016 while he was retried and found not guilty.
In the universe of DNA that's in DNA databases, comes back as identifying a man who's in the DNA database for criminal activity and lives a mile from the victim. It is beyond extraordinary. It's not that extraordinary to find DNA that exonerates a defendant, even one who sat in jail for decades. But for that DNA to come back and identify by name the actual perpetrator, an individual who lives a mile away, who's in that database for crime, for it to do that, and then to have a district attorney's office turn around and say, I guess we'll try Mr. Wright again. I guess we'll put these witnesses on the stand again, is an absolute outrage.
The 3 detectives are now charged with multiple counts of perjury for lying during the retrial. The statute of limitations for lying during Wright's first trial has expired.
Wright's interrogation by Santiago and Devlin was not recorded or taped. The grand jury further concluded that the detectives deployed unlawful tactics to coerce Wright into signing the false confession, including by threatening to, and this is a paraphrase, but it's essentially a quote, pull his eyes out and skull F him during depositions under oath for Wright's civil rights lawsuit based upon Wright's wrongful conviction, Santiago and Yastrzemski changed their sworn testimony, stating they actually had been told by one of the two trial prosecutors, former Assistant District Attorney Bridget Kern, about the DNA evidence clearing Wright before they got up and testified under oath at the 2016 retrial.
Well, it turns out the man whose DNA matched to the crime scene died before he could ever be charged. Wright and the team of attorneys at the Innocence Project are hoping this case has a deterrent effect on other prosecutors.
After he was wrongly convicted the first time, the prosecutors asked the jury to impose the death penalty. By a 7-5 vote, he narrowly escaped the death penalty.
Scariest day of my life going in there to find out what they, I mean, you just don't know. You can't describe it. I mean, you go numb, your body just shut down.
You know, it is no exaggeration to say that Tony Wright was not just wrongly convicted, he was framed for a rape and murder he didn't commit.
I love cheesecake. I've been to almost every eatery in the city 2 or 3 times a day. You know, I wake up every day since I've been out 3 o'clock in the morning just to lift my head up off the bed and just to look around to make sure I'm not dreaming and this is real.
Oh, Anthony Wright's story is just so unbelievably sad and quite disappointing. So, Terry, let me ask you, these officers, they're accused of lying, but their actions caused an innocent man to spend 25 years behind bars. If found guilty, do you think they should be ordered to pay restitution?
I do think they should be ordered. That's a long time to be in prison for something that you did not do. The perjury charges, if that is a conviction, that's a 3rd-degree felony in Pennsylvania. They could get 7 years in prison for each of those charges, and there's a $15,000 fine that could be imposed for restitution. But don't forget, there was a civil case where Wright won $9.85 million. Now, that doesn't mean anything as far as getting those 25 years back, but it does help him and his family move forward with their lives.
That's right, Terry. 25 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Dina, this is a hot topic. This is one of the many cases where the confession turns out to be false. So should there be more stringent requirements for obtaining confessions?
You know, there's so many things in this case. For one, thank goodness that the police officers were charged, because we see where police officers lie on affidavits to the court and they're often not charged. Maybe just the evidence gets thrown out. So, you know, we maybe even need to talk about making these charges stick more. I mean, they basically are taking away this man's life and they only got a 2nd or 3rd degree felony. How about a 1st degree felony? He's lucky he even got out at all. And then in terms of the confession, you know, sure, why not have a Miranda type warning before they can start interrogating somebody with a confession? Because people don't realize, certainly not the people that they're interrogating, that they can be lied to, right? That they can be threatened. People, you know, let's inform people of their rights, you know, and then there's maybe at least an even playing field, because I think a lot of people out there would be shocked to know that police officers can lie in order to obtain a confession, and they can. And I do think people should know that.
All right. Thank you so much, Dina, on that. Well, coming up on Law and Crime Daily, Robert Durst is back on the stand. The real estate heir admits to finding the body of his best friend, but he says he then ran. But do you believe his story? You're watching Law and Crime Daily. Well, Robert Durst, he's back on the stand for a 4th day of explosive testimony, telling the jury he found his best friend dead, but insists he's not the killer. Now, Durst is on trial for the murder of Susan Berman back in December of 2000. Now, prosecutors say Durst shot Berman because she threatened to go public with information about the disappearance of Durst's first wife, Kathy. On the stand, Durst said he had plans with Berman to work on a project the night she was found dead. And he says he arrived to see a note on her door saying that she left for a walk. He then said he opened the door with his key, walked around, and left. Later, he heard a bunch of honking, walked back inside of her home.
I saw Susan
lying on the floor with her feet on her back, with her feet towards the front of the house. I put my hand over her face. I might have left that out to see if she was breathing, to see if I could feel breath, and it felt cold. Then I grabbed her by her arms and lifted her up. Her head just hung down, and I could see that her hair was in some kind of liquid.
Well, Dina, Durst testified that when he went to visit Susan on that fateful day in December, she was already dead when he arrived. Now, do you think the jury believed him?
You know, if it was anybody else, I would say no, but somehow this man was able to get out of a conviction in Texas when he, cut the body. So if anybody were going to be able to talk himself out of it, it would be Robert Durst. But I do think in this trial, at this point, all of his kind of lies and over the decades with the disappearing people around him will catch up to him. And I do not think that that was persuasive enough.
Interesting. All right. Well, Terry, Durst mentions several new details, like the note on Susan's door and people passing by the house. What do you make of this new information?
I think there's a reason for each new detail, because these are details that at least I have not heard before. The note on the door supposedly was to inform him that Susan had gone out jogging and that she'd be gone for about an hour. So that is telling us the reason he let himself into the house. And so that was for the jury, and that was purposeful. And he's also talking about testimony where he heard people outside the house and the reason he went back in the house. And I think they're saying that because they know that those people might actually say something about what they saw.
Interesting. There's so much to talk about in this case, and we will, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the infamous cadaver note. How will Robert Durst explain writing to police after Susan Berman was murdered? Find out after the break. And welcome back. We're continuing the conversation about accused murderer Robert Durst. He is now admitting to writing the cadaver note. It was an anonymous letter written to the police telling them there was a body in Susan Berman's home.
I picked up the phone, dialed 911, and a lady's voice asked for my name. I decided I did not want to give them my name. So I decided that instead of calling 911, I would send the police a letter telling them that Susan was dead in her house.
Durst even admitted to lying about his involvement with the cadaver note in past interviews, saying he thought people would find it hard to believe that he wrote the note but didn't kill Susan Berman.
And on the inside, on the note?
Cadaver, 1527 Benedict Canyon Drive.
You've seen that, or copies of that letter in evidence here. Did you write that letter?
Yes, I did.
Did you lie about it for years?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's a very difficult thing to believe. I mean, I have difficulty believing it myself that I would write the letter and have not killed Susan Berman.
Well, on direct, Durst's defense attorney questioned him on if he would have any possible motives for killing Susan Berman.
Susan had been murdered. Someone must have had a reason, a motive, whatever, to kill Susan Berman. And I had no reason to kill Susan Berman.
Did you have any motive to kill Susan Berman?
No.
Was Susan blackmailing you?
No,
Did Susan ever threaten to blackmail you?
no,
Had Susan told you that the police might be talking to her, or she might be talking to the police?
yes.
So, Dina, Dick DeGurin questioned Durst about the cadaver note, but this is a critical part of the case. Did he spend enough time explaining the note?
You know, I think people probably do understand about the note. And, you know, it's clear that he didn't really admit to it until the handwriting expert, I think a part of the documentary, kind of tied it together with him. But what we understand now by listening to Durst and how good he is at kind of explaining away his actions is why the prosecution took weeks talking about Kathy's disappearance. You know, it seemed like they were going into minutia, and it seemed maybe too much, but it's because they needed to rebut that exact statement. Robert Durst saying he did not have a motive to kill Susan Berman. And I think they were very effective in that, because otherwise, maybe you would say, maybe he would have just left a note. But when you understand how much motive there was in relation to the disappearance of his wife, that becomes a lot more difficult of a statement for the jury to swallow.
And Terry, Durst provided new details about his actions after he found Susan's body. Why is the defense focusing on these details?
You know, I understand talking about the 911 call or talking about the cadaver note, but they gave some details about getting in his car, going to the airport, getting on a red eye, talking about visiting someone in Bridgehampton, ultimately going down to Florida for the new year. And those types of details I don't think will be helpful for the defense, because it sort of seems like after the death, that's, you know, what he was doing, not really focusing on Susan.
All right, we're going to keep an eye on this case. Thank you so much for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time.